Hello, and thank you, because if you're watching this, it's a bit of a weird way to open a video, wasn't it? But if you're watching this, then that means you have subscribed to my Patreon, and so I figured it was only appropriate. And what better way to say thank you than by looking at one of my most popular pieces of music, which is Africa. This is going to be the first of a series of videos I'm going to be doing on this Patreon channel where I break down tracks, both previous works that I've done and also, hopefully, other people's works as well. And there is an option on the, is it extras page or like a purchases page, where you can submit your music to me and I will break it all down and talk about elements that I might improve or work upon myself. But yes, this is the first sort of non-public video, so thank you very much and welcome. I hope you'll enjoy this. I've certainly been looking forward to it myself, and it's taken me quite a long time to even get this project back up to a functioning level. I had a few headaches opening it up, that has to be said.
7:59 a.m.
Africa 4 update. Right. Africa 4 it is. Loading instruments has failed. Oh my god. Oh my fucking god. I was just in that folder. Search in the last folder. Okay. Okay. I already knew that, thank you. Okay. What? I'm doing this a second time? Okay, sure. Yes. What the fuck? Fucking hell. Fuck off. Wait, what? The percussion was certainly the most egregious section. Epic toms. Yes. I still want epic toms. That's it. Oh my fucking god. Epic toms. The cymbals were mostly what needed changing quite a lot. Oh my god, there were so many. Gone. Cool. Okay. Ready to record. 52 minutes after starting this recording, the project is ready to be used. As I mentioned in the virtual instruments video, there's a few libraries that I no longer have access to, in which case they've been substituted with a newer library, trying to replicate the sound. I did refer back to the original master file a few times. There is a lot to break down here. This track was the first that I wrote where I proudly claimed that I had used over 100 tracks. I think that might have been a little bit optimistic of me. Looking at the number of tracks that have got one region on them is... There are a lot of things on this project that I would not do now in terms of writing, but there's also a lot of things that I listen to now and I think, that is actually not bad going for an 18-year-old. There is going to be some lessons here on what not to do, as well as what I have done, but the funny thing is it's become a very successful track, and it's by far and away the track that I get the most requests to license, and it has been used in all sorts of videos around the world, travel documentaries and adverts and stuff, some of which don't have anything to do with Africa, but then it's also the case that I've never actually been to Africa. So I think as an 18-year-old's interpretation of an entire continent, you know, it's not too bad going, I don't think, considering that it seems to have affected as many people as it has. I'm going to just go through section by section, and yeah, here it is. God, don't even know what to say. It's quite, I don't think I've opened this project since, like, I had a version that I tried opening in 2020 and I think I must have given up because I tried opening it now and half the things still didn't work. So this is the first time I'm hearing this project in like a good 10 years. Why am I holding this coffee whilst talking? I also love how we've got quite a few erratic naming conventions going on. So, you know, the brass here is called Quantum Horns 4 SLR_BIP. Just got my hands on East West Quantum Leap and I was like,
oh my god, that is the coolest name ever. Let's call everything Quantum.
what a cool word. I'm so embarrassed right now. And yet somehow this piece of music emerged out of that 18-year-old's brain. Don't ask me how, because I don't know. Let's solo the flutes and the strings and have a listen to the intro on its own. There is a lot to talk about here, so I'm only going to touch on the melody briefly because in the next episode on this Patreon, I will talk all about how I write a melody and how I come up with it. However, I remember just watched a David Attenborough documentary. It might have been Planet Earth or it might have been Africa. And I was inspired to write these 3 notes. It was literally... Why on earth am I recording to Steinway, Kalimba and the tuba? I would say if you've got a really strong melody, it excuses quite a bit of bad orchestration, which is what we're about to see. These 3 string sections are all playing 2 notes, which is a bit wrong. That's not to say that this can't be done. In a lot of orchestration, you can write what's called divizii, which is where you divide the section in half and have them play 2 notes. But it's generally not done because if you split a section in half, you weaken the sound of each individual note. The thing with samples, of course, is that this is a bit of a cheat because if you play 2 samples simultaneously, you get 2 sets of 16 violins, which means you don't get that thinness that you would get if it was actually played live, which is fine. I just think with the 10 years of knowledge that I've had since then, you don't need this many notes. I think I was chronically afraid as an 18-year-old that I would not get all the harmony through if I didn't put enough notes in, so I'd make sure every single note in the chord was covered at all times. If I go back to the opening where it's a little bit lower pitch, you can see here it's a bit thinner. Because there's less going on, it sounds more like an actual string section and less like a synth that's playing a chord. We can see if I go here, it was all about the modulation. I cannot stress how much this is just so laughably wrong to me now that I did this. East-West, like most libraries, allows you to control the dynamics of the instrument, so how loud or soft the violins are playing in this instance, using the mod wheel. And this actually changes the sample that we hear. So they record the violins playing super quietly, and if I bring the mod wheel down, that'll access those samples, so they sound like quiet violins. And then they record them playing mezzo, and then fortissimo, and then probably fortissimo. I'm not entirely sure how many layers there are, but if I have the mod wheel up to 100, I'm accessing violins playing loudly as recorded, and if I bring the mod wheel down, I'm accessing violins playing super quietly as recorded. So you can see here that I've left that completely flat. And instead opted to use expression to control the dynamics. And this jagged motion here is expressly to try and emulate the movement of the bows. The trouble with using expression is that expression is just volume. So it doesn't change the sound of the violins at all. It is literally like moving a volume slider up and down, which I can promise you does not sound as good as if I'd done it the other way around. The basses are only playing 1 note, which is correct, and they are playing in octaves with the cello. If I was just to solo these 2, and maybe just violins too, it still sounds like a rich, full chord, doesn't it? Which is a key thing that I was missing back then, because even though we've only got 5 voices, if you like, 5 string sections, they all produce rich overtones, extra harmonics, which we can hear in each note that's played. Even the basses, especially, we can hear the note. But we can also hear an octave above, which is the string sort of vibrating in 2 halves. We can hear a fifth and stuff like that. All these harmonics, which if you close your eyes and imagine that there's actually cellos playing an octave above, I can almost hear cellos playing in that because the sound is so full anyway. And this is fundamentally what I didn't understand about writing for an orchestra, is that, yes, don't worry about not every single note in the chord being covered at every octave, because the very nature of sound and acoustics is that those things do get filled in for you. And the reason I'm advising so heavily against doing this is it sounds a bit mushy and a bit unrealistic, and it's harder to mix. And if you then had to get a real orchestra to play it, it wouldn't sound how it sounds on here. You'd get a big difference because you've essentially spread butter over too much bread. I will go into more detail about this in a future video, but for now, let's move on and talk about, oh my God, what? NANI? That is delay. placed on a whole string section. I should say, because I realised that, I'm like, how on earth could anybody think that that's a good idea? Well, I clearly did. Delay is great for certain instruments and certain jobs. It is not good for putting on thick chordal strings, because when you move from one chord to another chord, that first chord is then echoing in the middle of your new chord, so you're getting an enormous amount of mushiness. And if I just disable the delay for a second and have another listen. Okay, so you might say, well, it doesn't make that much of a difference. Well, at least that means now that I've disabled it, it's going to be easier to mix and master. What I've mentioned so far kind of applies to the rest of the piece, just in different ways. So if I solo out these staccatos now. What the hell is this? Oh god, it's just compounding. I can hear the delay bouncing off of the notes. And now, 3 sections of cellos completely out of their register as well. They're going above the violas, which is a bit of a cardinal sin in orchestral writing. Have the violas play that bit, or even heck, the first violins are playing it. Alright, I think I see what's going on here. So evidently I was not satisfied that this melody was loud enough, so I copied and pasted it over into the cellos. In case I hadn't made it clear by this point, this isn't really correct to have the cellos doing this. Also, why the cellos? Why not the violas? They're playing in the middle of all that. There is a lot too much going on here, basically. I do like the dun, dun, dun. One thing you'll notice as well about older projects versus newer projects, notice this. All this is a lot of copying and pasting, and it doesn't necessarily mean that the composition is worse. It just means that there is less expressiveness, I think. Because if you play it, even if you're playing the same thing over and over again, I do these days tend to play from start to finish, all in one go if I can, or in bits if I can't. Because at least, even if you're playing the same notes each time, and then you quantize them, which is fine, and I do that a lot as well for fast stuff, it just means that the modulation movement that you're doing with your left hand will be different each time as well, and you can vary it up that way. This rigorous up and down, up and down, up and down, perfectly to the same point, is very satisfying to look at, and I do remember being satisfied looking at it as an 18-year-old, but now I think to myself, that is so robotic. It just means that this string is now doing the same thing. Over and over. Again, it sounds really nice, it's very rich, I don't need so many notes. In fact, this is quite an easy section to work on. I could probably demo by taking a few out. So let's just leave the violas doing that third. Cellos, we haven't even got any violins 1 for whatever reason, so let's just have a listen to that. I don't really think that that has suffered any loss of harmony. It does sound a little bit less thick. That is a good thing. It sounds a little bit less thick. It's now going to be easier to mix. It's more realistic sounding and more like what an actual orchestra would play. Funnily enough, this outro is actually a bit of an improvement because we actually take a few flipping notes out, thank goodness. But even here, the cello is playing 2 notes at once. The basses are sitting there doing nothing. Have the basses move up to a slightly higher register and have the cellos do the 1 note. Quick look at the brass. Quantum. So here is actually closer to what you would write for these players. Though, of course, once again, I forget writing this, that's 2 trombones and 1 bass trombone playing the same note in the sample, meaning that now that I've got 3 notes, we've now got 6 trombones and 3 bass trombones playing all of this lot. Again, with the delay on a whole section. It wouldn't be unreasonable to maybe put some delay on the trumpets if you wanted that kind of effect. Sure, putting it on tubas? Not so much. I have to say, this does hold up fairly well. I might be tempted to say that the trombone players are going to be getting a bit red-faced by the end of this section. There's quite long notes here. And Here's a bit lazy. I really should have joined up these notes. You can tell I was clearly excited because I neglected to move any of these notes ahead of the beat. So they're all playing a little bit late. If I was to move these to the left a little bit. There we go, now they're actually coming in right on the beat. This melody that the horns are playing is very high up as well, but not impossible, and does really hold up, actually. It's one of my favourite melodies, I think, that I've written. Again, asking the players to really delve deep within themselves to bring up that amount of oxygen, but yes, it all does its purpose. There's nothing massively interesting to talk about. It is just chords played in these instruments. There's no attempt to try and harmonise with the horns a little bit more. Like, for instance, here now, I would try moving the top trombone line up, perhaps more like this. It feels a bit sacrilegious to mess around with this piece now, to be honest with you. I am impressed with my ability to modulate through a few different keys here and then end up back at the beginning again in E flat major. I think that was pretty well done. Let's have a look at the choir now. I really want to know why I've got 3 instances of the female vocalists, 1 of the men, and then a combined patch. Let's have a listen. Now, I probably only had this octave and no harmony or other voices because I just didn't want my computer to melt. But in honesty, the restraint means that it actually works very well. It mixes nicely with the rest of the orchestra. So I didn't know how MIDI channels worked or how to do multiple outputs from a single contact instance, so I just done MIDI channel Omni, put them together so that actually... I thought it sounded a bit thick, considering that there's only 3 notes on it. What this means is that every single one of these notes is triggering both male and female choir. So 3 male voices, 3 female voices, 6 in total. Again, this isn't correct. There should be 4 voices, sopranos, altos, tenors, and bass. And any more than that is, strictly speaking, a little bit unnecessary. I mean, I've loaded up 2 individual instruments here, so this wasn't actually about saving hard drive space. This was just probably making my life easier at the time. I don't think I'd recommend writing in this way. Write each part to be unique to the person that's singing it, and not just have the men and the women singing the same things in octaves. So, copy and pasted version of the melody, move down a tone, and by the looks of it, I did something quite clever here. I used the direction mixer to make them sound smaller and further away. It definitely has an element of nostalgia, this patch, doesn't it? Especially with all the reverb and that EQ making it sound like it's coming from far away and a long time ago, evoking imagery of the savannah at sunset. I've had a real tendency throughout my writing life to massively overproduce things. So in this instance, I probably did play this in, but then to make sure that it was perfect, I felt the need to quantize the note length to be exactly the same. Looking at the note velocity, it's just massively overproduced, which means that it doesn't sound quite as real as if I just played it in and left the velocities as they were, trying to nail the performance. It's fine if you're not piano savvy, if you're not playing the piano that often and you're using it as a writing thing, that's fine. But I just would recommend you could always go to functions if I wanted to, MIDI transform and humanize this control here, which just adds a little bit of random variation to it all. Okay, here in this solo section we can see I did play something in and then I left the velocities as I played them. However, again, it is just completely perfectly quantized. Now, quantizing is fine, but you do take a little bit of the humanity out of it. Because you can turn down the strength of the quantizing. Right, this is quite fun. Let's have a listen to how I originally played it. got a little janky at the end there. But there are some parts of that where I think there's a little bit of a pause from, I sort of go like... That little bit of humanity makes a big difference. Also, if you're wondering what Propanium is, it's this little extra layer thing that 8Dio included with the Steinway, which is used very texturally. We've got harp. Not the best harp writing I've ever heard. I remember what I was saying about glissandes. Right, okay, let's go on to effects, percussion and stuff like that. Again, lots of copying and pasting going on, but... yeah, I think this incessant... Good grief, that's a lot of reverb and delay. Logic's inbuilt percussion is passable, but it is not great, and the same with Garritan Personal Orchestra. So I would swamp these cymbals in a shit ton of reverb, layer them all up on top of each other with different EQs and volumes and whatnot to try and hide that. If you imagine this piece played at twice the tempo, it would just be like such chaos with all of this stuff going on. Or if there was a fast passage in this piece, it would be awful to write with. It's because this is a very slow tempo piece that we can get away with having so much delay and reverb. Gotta love Logic's inbuilt cymbal here. Look at the compression on this. Gee, that's a lot of compression. I remember why I did this too. It's because, unfortunately, you won't be able to hear it now, but in the original library, you could hear the individual taps of the drumsticks against the cymbal. You could hear like a like that. And I hated that so much. Plus I didn't know about the fact that, you know, in an orchestral setting, you tend to use soft sticks, which is also a broad generalization. Anyway, I didn't know that that was how it's supposed to sound. It's not just a magical cymbal that goes shh on its own. You do need to hit it many times to get that sound. I love the fact that I then controlled the volume of the cymbal with automation using Logic's inbuilt gain plugin. That's especially amazing. And then for different cymbals, I would get different pitches out of them by using Logic's inbuilt pitch shifter. I mean, obviously now I have libraries that have got different size cymbals which create different pitches. But yeah, that's one way of doing it if you have one cymbal sample and you want to get different sounds out of it. And oh my god, if I didn't have enough delay already, I've got stereo delay here as well, extending the sound so that it rings out for longer and sounds more epic. Couple of gongs. I think this one is Logic's inbuilt one. Oh, that's hilarious. So I've got a chorus plugin put on it and I was like, yeah, intensity 100%, mix 100%. We're going all in with this chorus. And then I was like, you know what sounds the best? Let's modulate it at 0 hertz. This means that it's not actually doing anything. If I put this on, 800 hertz, now you can hear that chorus having an effect. But you know what? This was all about creating that epic sound. So this is what I did. I'm going to turn that off again. A few more little producer techniques that I used, fallen out of fashion, but I could actually do again. So you can see here we've got this beautifully curved automation, bringing Apple's bandpass filter up, which is, as the name implies, it's allowing a certain band of EQ to pass through, but none of the other frequencies. And what this does is create a filtered riser type sound, which is very familiar. Oh yep, gotta have that delay. So much delay. For God's sake, Marcus, stop putting delay on everything. Got this track called Perk 1. So... what the hell is my naming conventions? Literally next to a track that's called Various Percussion, Roman numeral 2, and we got
Perk Effect 1.
Not that I could write it perhaps like this. That would be too mainstream. No, we got Perk Effect. We've got a MIDI region called Beads here, which implies it was originally on another track and then I moved it. What are you doing then, Perk 1? Oh yeah. Reverse cymbal sample from bouncing out one of Logic's inbuilt cymbals. This single audio file has been in pretty much every single project since 2014. I have lost count of the amount of times I've used it. I cannot remember what cymbal it even was in the first place, but yeah, It's like one of those things that's like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. If I want it to sound any different, I just add EQ to it. That's a really good sample, to be fair. Like, that's one of Logic's inbuilt samples, and it's really good. But in terms of African instruments, there is that djembe. We've got kalimba somewhere, and an Indian sitar, which, yeah. If you want to see a little bit more cultural appropriation, I've also used a didgeridoo, which, yes, a very African instrument, the didgeridoo, isn't it? But yeah, this is all just making do with what I knew and what I had on hand at the time, including my tin whistles, which, you know, again, the Irish whistle, funnily enough, is not a very African instrument, but if you play it with a lot of breathiness, so you get that sound. We've got kalimba and marimba. Again, very much a Westerner's perspective. This is like coming from experience of an 18-year-old watching The Lion King and stuff like that. It's like,
What's African? Marimba.
if I was to write it again now, it would probably sound a little bit different. And it's probably for the best that I did write it as an 18-year-old. I can look back on that and say at least I was completely innocent. You can see as well there's this track here called Rory. I think my best friend at the time, Rory, came round for a sleepover one day and I showed him this piece of music, because back then we used to do stuff like that. He offered to play, so I recorded him just improvising throughout this entire piece of music. If I'm remembering correctly, it just felt like too much work to sort through it all and put what he'd played into the piece in any way. So I just left this track on mute and kept my tin whistle. I guess by not including it, it means this piece is 100% my own. And what have I got here? I like how out of time it goes halfway through. I was just like, yeah, fuck it, that'll be fine. I've got to love the fact that even with all those strings doing all those voices, I still felt the need to put in synth pad chords as well, as if we needed even more harmony. Incredible. Unfortunately, our female vocalist is not working today. I'll just fill in for her. Last instrument to look at, which really shows my prowess as a guitarist, is this guitar. It sounds like Coldplay or something. This is Logic's inbuilt acoustic guitar, by the way, which has these chords down at the very bottom of the register, I believe. Yeah, it's just sort of someone that doesn't know how to play guitar writing a guitar line, and definitely could benefit from a little bit more variation in the velocity here. So if I brought this one down, sounds a little bit better, but yes, God, that's a bit all over the place. The production, of course, has come a long way, but I think a lot of the ideas and the inspiration that I found from watching documentaries about Africa was evidently what resonated with so many people. I'm happy with this piece. I'm happy with how it turned out in the end, and I'm delighted that so many people have enjoyed it over the years. And I think it goes to show that even without having necessarily the best knowledge in orchestral writing or in production, it still ended up being a piece of music that people loved. And I think that's probably the main takeaway from all of this, is that it doesn't matter if you're not necessarily 100% of the way there with production or with orchestration. Just write good music and the rest will follow. And on that note, this was how I wrote Africa. Thank you very much for watching, and thank you for subscribing to my Patreon. I hope you'll enjoy what I've made and what there is to come. And until then, I will see you when I see you. Goodbye.